Today, we will peer beyond the veil of the ordinary and touch upon two stories that perhaps should never have been told. Lock your doors, dim the lights, and make sure you are truly alone, because after what you hear, you may not be certain of anything. Doll House on Elm Street.
The house at 13 Elm Street had stood abandoned for decades. Its windows were boarded up, the paint on its walls peeled, and the garden had turned into a wild thicket, hiding it from prying eyes. Local children told scary stories about Mrs. Peabody, an old woman who lived there alone and was rumored to collect antique dolls. After her mysterious disappearance, the house was never sold, and a gloomy aura enveloped it, turning it into a place no one dared to step foot in. Jacob, a young real estate agent specializing in distressed properties, saw only potential profit in this house. He was pragmatic and didn't believe in superstitions, thinking that every story had a rational explanation. He was tasked with clearing out the house and preparing it for sale. It was a job no one else wanted to take. Halloween was approaching, but Jacob was too busy to pay attention to the pre-holiday hustle. The first day in the house was filled with dust and stale air. Jacob found the house to be cluttered with belongings. Old furniture, yellowed books, and everywhere, dolls. Thousands of dolls. They stood on shelves, sat on chairs, peered from every corner. Some were beautiful, porcelain, with meticulously painted faces. Others were old rag dolls, with torn limbs and empty eye sockets. All of them seemed to be watching him. Jacob felt a slight unease, but attributed it to fatigue and the peculiar interior. On the second day, Jacob began sorting things. He moved boxes, took out trash. It seemed to him that some of the dolls were changing their positions. For example, the one that had been sitting on the windowsill in the living room suddenly appeared on a chair in the hallway. He shrugged it off, deciding it was just his absent-mindedness or an unfortunate arrangement. However, the oddities continued. He found dolls in places where he definitely hadn't left them. One time, he walked into the kitchen and discovered that all the dolls on the table were turned towards the door, as if they were waiting for his arrival. At night, the house became especially eerie. Darkness swallowed all street sounds, leaving Jacob alone with a silence broken only by the creaks of the old house. He thought he heard a faint tapping, as if porcelain fingers were drumming on wood. He heard a thin, almost inaudible rustle, like someone's breath nearby. One night, waking up to a strange sound, he saw that his bedroom door was slightly ajar, though he clearly remembered closing it. In the doorway stood a doll, a large, old doll in a Victorian dress, with dark, glassy eyes that seemed to follow him. Jacob jumped, his heart pounding. He leapt up, turned on the light, and the doll was gone. Or maybe it hadn't been there at all.
Jacob began to doubt his sanity. He tried to find a logical explanation for all these events. Perhaps the old house was playing tricks on him. Perhaps it was his own imagination fatigued by work. But the feeling that he wasn't alone grew stronger. The dolls began to haunt him. He found them in the most unexpected places, under his pillow, in the bathroom, in the closet. Their lifeless faces stared at him with unsettling persistence.
One day, while sorting through Mrs. Peabody's old study, Jacob found her diary. It was written in a small, neat hand, and the pages were yellowed with age. In the diary, Mrs. Peabody described her deep attachment to her dolls, how she saw them as the children she never had. She wrote about how she talked to them, how they responded to her. At first, it seemed like the harmless madness of an old woman, but then the entries became increasingly disturbing. Mrs. Peabody mentioned that the dolls were becoming more alive. Their eyes seemed to move, and they whispered secrets to her at night. The last entries were desperate. They want to come out. They want to play. They said they need a friend. And the very last entry, written in a trembling hand, "He has come, a new friend, and now they will play forever." The moment Jacob finished reading those lines, he heard a faint chuckle, a chuckle coming from everywhere. He looked up and saw that all the dolls in the study, hundreds of pairs of glass eyes, were fixed on him. He felt a chill run down his spine. Their faces, previously emotionless, now seemed malicious and mocking.
Jacob panicked. He tried to rush out of the room, but the door was locked. The dolls began to move. At first, it was a subtle movement. Then they slowly started to slide off shelves, fall from chairs, and move across the floor. Their porcelain limbs creaked, their cloth bodies dragged. They moved towards him, surrounding him from all sides. Jacob screamed, his voice drowned out by a rising chorus of whispers and soft giggles. He retreated to the window, trying to smash it, but the glass was too strong. The dolls were very close now. Their dead eyes stared at him, and words seemed to emanate from their lipless mouths. "Play with us. Play with us forever." Jacob felt a touch on his leg, then on his arm. They were the tiny but strong hands of the dolls, pulling him down. He resisted, but there were too many of them. They filled the room, their bodies, hard and soft, engulfing him. Jacob felt his breathing grow heavier, and his lungs burned. The last thing he saw were countless eyes looking down at him before darkness consumed him.
The house at 13 Elm Street still stands abandoned, and if you listen closely on Halloween, you can hear faint whispers and laughter coming from within, as if an endless game continues there.
The Ghost of the Bloody Miller.
The old mill on the edge of Ravenkill had stood silent and abandoned for over 100 years. Its wooden blades had long rotted away, and the stones that once ground green were covered in moss and ancient dust. Locals avoided the mill, telling tales of the bloody miller, a cruel man named Thomas Blackwood who, according to legend, killed his family in a fit of madness and then vanished. His ghost, they claimed, roamed the ruins, seeking its next victim. Emily, a student researcher of paranormal phenomena, came to Ravenkill with one goal: to prove or disprove the existence of the supernatural. Halloween was the perfect time for her research, when the line between worlds is believed to thin. Armed with cameras, voice recorders, and motion sensors, she set up a small tent near the mill, preparing for the night.
On the first night, Emily only heard the wind howling through the dilapidated walls and the creaking of old trees. Her instruments were silent. She was disappointed, but not disheartened. Legends aren't born out of thin air, she told herself. She spent several hours studying old records about Miller Blackwood. They described him as a strange, reclusive man who grew increasingly aggressive over time. His neighbors avoided him, and children feared him. The last mention of him was made by a local priest who tried to exorcise evil spirits from the mill, but returned from there pale and trembling. On the second night, Emily decided to go inside the mill. The air inside was cold and heavy, permeated with the smell of decay and something else, more acrid and unpleasant. Her flashlight picked out shadows from the darkness that seemed to move along the walls. The motion sensors remained calm, but the voice recorder began picking up strange, low-frequency noises she couldn't identify. It wasn't the wind, but something else, like heavy breathing.
Emily found the old millstones where, according to legend, Blackwood had committed his deeds. The surface of the stone was covered with dark, dried stains that she thought looked too much like blood. She touched the stone and felt an icy cold penetrate to her bones, as if the stone had absorbed centuries of horror. At that moment, one of her temperature sensors plummeted. The cold became unbearable, and Emily felt an invisible presence close by.
She turned on her night vision camera and began filming. Nothing was visible in the image but dust and cobwebs. But her ears caught something that made her freeze. It was a creaking sound, as if someone was slowly dragging something heavy and uneven across the floor. The sound was approaching. Emily felt goosebumps run down her spine. She began slowly backing away, retreating towards the exit. The sound grew louder, now accompanied by a light, heavy shuffling, as if someone was dragging their feet. As she almost reached the exit, the creaking stopped. A complete, dead silence fell. Emily turned around. In the center of the mill, where the millstone stood, she saw it. A tall, hunched figure, composed of swirling, translucent shadow. The figure was clad in tattered clothes, and a wide hood concealed its face. but Emily could make out two glowing red eyes burning in the darkness. It was the ghost of the bloody miller.
The ghost made no sound, but Emily felt a wave of despair and rage emanating from it. It began to move slowly towards her, its shuffling steps now clearly audible. From its translucent hands, drops of something dark seemed to trickle, evaporating instantly before reaching the floor. It was blood. Emily realized that all the legends were true. She was in mortal danger. She bolted. The ghost moved faster than she can imagine, its shadow gliding across the floor, overtaking her. Emily felt a cold breath on the back of her neck. She ran out of the mill without looking back. Moonlight flooded the surroundings, but it brought no relief. The ghost was right behind her. She ran across the field, trying to reach her tent, but her legs gave way from fear. The ground beneath her feet was wet with dew, and she stumbled, falling into the grass. When she lifted her head, the ghost stood over her, its glowing eyes directly above her face. It made no sound, but Emily heard a voice in her head, hoarse and full of rage. "You came to know. Now you know. And you will stay here to become part of the mill."
She tried to scream, but her voice caught in her throat. The ghost extended its translucent hands towards her. Emily felt an icy cold seize her body, beginning to penetrate deep inside, freezing her blood. Then she felt a touch, cold and weightless, that seemed to pass through her skin. She felt her own essence begin to leave her body, slowly dissolving into the air. By morning, when the sun rose over Ravenkill, Emily's tent was empty. Her belongings remained untouched, but Emily herself was nowhere to be found. Only on the grass, near where she fell, were there several dark, dried stains like blood. Local residents, passing by the mill, still tell tales of the ghost of the bloody miller and say that sometimes, on the darkest nights, a faint, feminine scream can be heard from the old mill, drowned out by a heavy creaking sound, as if something is slowly being ground inside.
Good night. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.